Hello, everyone. Today, I'd like to talk about the infant microbiome in sickness and in health. This is going to be part one of at least two, just too much material to cover in one video. For me, this will be the most fascinating of the videos that I've made for a couple of reasons. One, because we're talking about the infant microbiome, which you don't hear a lot about, but also because of the remarkable recovery of this one infant that I want to talk about today. Here is how it began. This is actually his second gut test from Ombre, and this is at about the 3-month range. His first test showed a huge amount of this, what Ombre calls a pathobiont, which is Bacteroides fragilis. And you can see on his second test, he had almost 70% B fragilis. And if you look at the community range there, they suggest a maximum of 0.1%. So this is a huge amount. In B fragilis, some research would say it's not always a pathogen, but all the research I found, it is mostly a pathogenic bacteria, especially when you've got this much in an infant gut. And add to that the fact that you should not have very much B fragilis, but you should have a lot of Bifidobacterium, which this infant did not have at this stage, which we'll see in just a little bit. So moving on to the same information, but this is instead of Ombre, this is BiomeSite. I always appreciate BiomeSite and their charting capabilities, where you can just keep adding subsequent gut tests, and it will compare them and track them. I find that to be extremely helpful. And you see, he actually jumped up in a second test and then began to come down. So the question we're going to answer this morning is, how do you go from uh, Ombre had him at almost 70%, and BiomeSite has him here at about 55%. How do you go from 55% B fragilis all the way down to 0.3%? So what is happening here? Let me just give you a quick end result here. According to Ombre, his total good bacteria, that would be probiotics plus commensals, went from 28% at its worst to the most recent test last month, 97%. So that's a ridiculous improvement. And his symptoms immediately improved. Literally, he went from the main symptom that his parents noticed was a lot of watery diarrhea, stools, and very, very frequent, to literally, as soon as he started taking this probiotic we'll talk about, he did not have a bowel movement for almost a week. And the probiotic will the literature says this is exactly what tends to happen. So saw immediate improvement. Some of the other symptoms, fussiness, it was more difficult to notice. With infants, various things could be going on, but clearly that symptom immediately improved. So, background here: this infant had a quite a traumatic birth, some of which definitely impacted his gut. Others were not sure, but it was part of his story. At his birth, his hemoglobin was only 3.7. You see the normal range there, extremely low. The attending physician said in his career he'd only ever seen one baby born with a lower hemoglobin, so very serious. It happened because of an unknown fetal maternal hemorrhage, and usually don't know what causes those. That happens when, in this case, most of the infant's blood was transferred through the umbilical cord into the mother. So he was born with an extremely low hemoglobin. Thankfully, his mom really saved his life. She was given the opportunity to have a morning of stillness and notice that there really wasn't any movement. So alerted the doctors and went from there all the way to emergency C-section later that day. If you're familiar with APGAR scores, his was only 4 when he was born, which again, very serious, critical issue there. Because of low hemoglobin, he had low oxygen throughout his body, but especially to the brain, which resulted in a mild stroke. So to prevent more inflammation in the brain, they did something that I was not familiar with. It's called therapeutic cooling. They cooled his body, so he's now intubated, and they cooled his body down to 92 degrees for 3 days to reduce inflammation and prevent more possible damage to the brain. So he went through that. Of course, he had an emergency C-section. He was given 2 different antibiotics in the NICU, which is pretty common. The more traumatic birth, the more likely a C-section baby is to be given antibiotics. Thankfully, he only spent, with all of that trauma, only spent 10 days in the NICU, and then went home and had a little bit of anemia, low platelets for about a month, but just every day seemed to be improving. So how does this relate to the gut? Research shows that babies born vaginally have a dramatic increase in certain species of bifidobacteria in the first 3 days after birth. In contrast, bifidobacteria levels remain significantly lower in babies born by C-section until a week after birth, assuming the baby is breastfed. And that's an important assumption there we'll talk about. But what they're saying is, if you, many of you know, for C-section babies, they obviously are not passing through the birth canal, and that is the time when the newborns pick up all of the good bacteria from their moms. That's the first huge transfer of bacteria from moms to babies, and that's completely missed. And then, so not only is the gut not seeded with all that good bacteria, but whatever is there is immediately just decimated by the antibiotics. In this case, 2 different sorts of antibiotics. So what the result is, you take a C-section, you add antibiotics, you almost certainly will end up with a leaky gut. And if you're not familiar with what a leaky gut is, I'll describe that a little bit later. But you've got dysbiosis, you've got huge gut issues. So here again is his B. fragilis, and comparing it to now this is B. fragilis is obviously one species of Bacteroides. So the Bifidobacterium is, now we're at the genus level. This is his total Bifidobacteria. And you can see that's a clear inverse relationship between the B. fragilis and the total Bifidobacterium. As one goes up, the other goes down. That's very, very clear. And what happened here is after his second gut test, he was given this probiotic, which is now Bifidobacteria longum, subspecies infantis, and then you get all the way down to the strain level, it's EVC001. And because this is the infantis is a subspecies, I'll just be referring to it, as most people do, to simply as B. infantis. So after his first gut test, and a huge amount of B. fragilis and low bifidobacteria, especially for a newborn, as you'll see, newborns should be closer to 80% with a vaginal birth and otherwise healthy newborn. And so after his first gut test, there was some concern. So we were able to link them up with a lactation consultant, which is also an expert in infant microbiomes. And this lactation consultant has access to tremendous amount of research and researchers. So we're very glad to have her on board. But after that first gut test, she, based on her experience, said, well, let's not do anything. Let's wait and see if it improves. And obviously, in her experience, that does happen sometimes, or maybe often. But in this case, it did not improve. It just got worse. The B. fragilis went up, and his Bifido crashed. So she recommended this B. infantis, this specific strain of B. infantis. And things turned around absolutely immediately, as I said, especially at the symptom level. And after the first gut test, you see just amazing, amazing results. And of course, this is about a month later. I'm guessing most of that improvement happened within the first couple of weeks. Very, very quick turnaround. So you look at on the right side there, I have a question mark, optimum. Are these now optimum levels for a baby infant microbiome? Well, he is sitting there at about the 5-month range. And the short answer is no one knows for sure. Again, the lots of research shows that a newborn healthy microbiome, 80% bifidobacteria is sort of a good thing to aim at. But now at 5 months out, HMO in the breast milk, actually human milk oligosaccharides, we'll talk about that a little bit as well, begins to decrease. It's just, I think, it is the body's way of, and I would say, first of all, let me back up and say, my worldview is that God has created all of these wonderful things. As we're talking about this symbiotic relationship between mother and infant, and especially the HMOs in the breast milk, and it actually decreases. It starts much higher and then decreases over the period of lactation and newborn age, and it's a wonderful thing. But no one knows for sure, what's at about 5 months, what's an optimum level. But the point is, there was an extreme change here, and symptoms improved. So I don't think there's any question you can say. So sometimes it can be difficult to determine exactly, does this person have dysbiosis, a leaky gut? Are they now improving? I don't think that in this case anyone would question the result that he was ill. He went from sickness to health. He went from a leaky gut to was most certainly a much healthier gut. And how did this happen? Well, that's part of the question we're going to try to answer. A quote from one: research, metabolism of HMOs by B. infantis results in the formation of organic acids, mainly lactic and acetic acids, which lowers the fecal pH. The acidified gut milieu is a deterrent to the proliferation of detrimental bacteria, including known pathogens. So in other words, the B. infantis reducing the pH of the gut, and the B. fragilis cannot tolerate that low pH, so it begins to kill it off. But the Bifido does just fine at the lower pH. So that is, I believe, the main cause and effect which turned this infant gut around. Also noticed amazing difference in species diversity, that again, it's inversely proportional to the B. fragilis. As one goes down, the other goes up. And no surprise, if you've got almost 60% of one species in your gut, you're going to have a much lower diversity of total species. But what's remarkable is the crazy amount of diversity that did finally produce in his gut. And even though he only went up, I say only, in quotes, to 30% or so Bifidobacteria, there is just a wonderful diversity of other bacteria, butyrate producing bacteria, lots of healthy gram-positive probiotic commensal bacteria. So that is also supporting the health of his gut. By the way, the X is there. The green X is when he began to receive the B. infantis probiotic, and the red X on these charts is when he stopped receiving it. So he was only given it for 2 weeks, which is absolutely remarkable, because many times the probiotics, you need to keep continuing to take them because they don't seem to permanently colonize in the gut. Well, this is not the case with this strain of B. infantis. Only 2 weeks, and it clearly colonized, because you can see the results, both the reduction of the B. fragilis and the ongoing higher levels of bifidobacteria. They persisted for about 2 months by the time the final gut test was taken last month. So obviously colonizing and remaining there in the gut, which is a very, very good sign. I've been so fascinated by this topic. I must have read or skimmed between 50 and 60 papers. So I'll just give you some highlights. Given that aberrant gut microbiome compositions in early life, which is dysbiosis, are important determinants of acute and chronic ailments later in life, restoring B. infantis to the infant gut may be a key step toward improving lifetime health of future generations. So there's just endless research that shows if you do not have a huge amount, again, up to 80%, is ideal, it seems, of bifidobacteria in the first couple months of a newborn's life, then it really can set a trajectory for the rest of his or her life. All sorts of research showing chronic ailments, asthma, any sort of metabolic disease can be at least associated with, not always clear cause and effect, but associated with future problems. So to get a lot of bifidobacteria very early in life, I think everyone agrees is an absolutely critical thing to do. B. infantis is commonly found in breastfed infants in countries where the incidence of immune-mediated disorders is low, and this is surprising, such as Bangladesh and Malawi, but rarely in Europe, also in other Western areas like the United States. Introducing B. infantis has been successfully accomplished in strains such as the EVC001, which is made by Evolved Biosystems, which is able to stably and persistently colonize and remodel the intestinal microbiome of breastfed infants, leading to reduced fecal calprotectin, a marker of intestinal inflammation. Well, I've already shown you how it did stably and persistently colonize in the gut, and there's clear reduction of inflammation as well. We conclude that in infants not colonized by bifidobacteria, or in cases where these microbes fail to expand during the first months of life, there's evidence of systemic and intestinal inflammation, increased frequencies of activated immune cells, and reduced levels of regulatory cells, indicative of systemic immune dysregulation, which, your immune system, because of these gut changes throughout the body, is dysregulated. It's not healthy, or less healthy than it should be. Another research showing in breastfed infants, bifidobacteria constitute more than 80% of the intestinal microbiota, whereas bifidobacteria comprise only 3 to 6% of the adult fecal flora. So huge differences there. Moreover, the species distribution is different in infants and adults. B. adolescentis and B. longum, subspecies longum, so it's just abbreviated as B. longum, are the major bifidobacterial species in the adult intestinal flora, and B. infantis and B. breve are the predominant species in the intestinal tract of human infants. Well, I've found this to be true in terms of the adult gut. I've had up to 8% bifido in my gut, and the B. adolescentis and B. longum have been my two major species. And in this infant, the B. infantis is the predominant bifido in his gut, but he's got very little still, even after all this, almost non-existent B. breve. Let me say a comment too about the B. infantis. Because we're using ombre, which only goes down to the species level, it shows up as B. longum. So the assumption, and I think he started about 10% B. longum, went up to now this 35% B. longum. So we're assuming, because we can't get down to the subspecies level, that this is B. infantis. And I'm also guessing that the 10% he had before he went on the B. infantis probiotic was B. infantis predominantly, but certainly not the EVC001 strain. So we can say with a high degree of confidence that is what's happening. But you would need to do something like a deeper shotgun. It's called a shotgun testing of the gut that Tiny Health does. That's their gut test. That's the technology there to know for certain. So I just want to make that clear. Now, this research shows that the adult gut is 3 to 6% bifido. My experience is that it's way less than that most adults walking around probably have less than 1% bifido. In fact, here is a screenshot from somebody who I helped get their gut test from BiomeSite, and they only have 0.25% of bifido, but that still put them at the 53rd percentile. So they have more bifido than half of the people that have the results uploaded to BiomeSite. So that's why I say 3 to 6% is generous. It's probably less than 1%. So you see just the huge changes between infant gut and adult gut. Here's another display of data showing that now, if you look on the left side there, you see the blue is actinobacteria. This just means Bifidobacteria. Actinobacteria is at the phylum level, uh, and and so all Bifidobacteria are actinobacteria. So it means the same thing. But then if you look at the breakdown at the species level, you see a predominant amount of B. longum, which would be, as you've already seen, the B. infantis. So just another way of showing you how much Bifido is in a healthy newborn microbiome. So talking here about the leaky gut, dysbiosis. What does this mean if you're not familiar with it? Well, we have a healthy colon on the left in the blue and an unhealthy on the right. And what you see there is, if you see that yellow mucus layer, everything on the top of that would be what's inside a colon. That would be for any human. And so the only thing, and then below that you have these epithelial cells called colonocytes, and there's only a single layer of those. And then in this graphic on the bottom, which is not really demonstrated here, would be your blood supply. So the only thing separating all the internal components of your colon and your blood supply is a thin layer of mucus and a single layer of these colonocytes. So you see how absolutely crucial this is for health, because in a healthy gut, the colonocytes retain what is called these tight junctions, so nothing can get into the bloodstream from the colon. But in a leaky gut, what that means is the tight junctions are destroyed, they're harmed, and these gaps open wide. That's increased intestinal permeability, and things like this pathogenic bacteria, B. fragilis, sometimes food particles, other toxins such as LPS, lipopolysaccharide, can more easily slip through these junctions and enter the bloodstream and travel anywhere throughout the body, causing inflammation, disease states all throughout the body. It has the potential to do that. So in this case, with infant gut, what we need is an abundant HMO consuming infant type Bifidobacteria, which we have in the B. infantis, and then a large supply of HMOs, which comes from breast milk. And that will hopefully then lead to a healthy gut. But dysbiosis or leaky gut results when you don't have the HMO consuming infant type Bifidobacteria, the B. infantis, and you've got a lower amount of HMOs, which you might have um, in a formula fed infant, especially if there's no HMO added to that formula. So that will result in a leaky gut. So the result is, if you have lots of HMOs and something like B. infantis, you will, all things being equal, you will have a healthier, much healthier microbiome. Let me back up here and talk more broadly about how all this works in any person. So the last couple of years, if you were to ask me, if I get in a conversation about diets and health, and someone ask me what sort of diet that I follow, I would say I follow the gut farmer diet. In other words, I eat as much as I can foods, and structure my diet in such a way that it will feed my gut and make it the healthiest as it could possibly be. So I just coined that the gut farmer diet. And to break this down, you've got prebiotics. So you're feeding and seeding your gut through diet, prebiotics, and probiotics to produce healthy postbiotics. So if you break those down, prebiotics are food for beneficial bacteria. So you've got this wonderful symbiotic relationship between your gut bacteria and the rest of your body. And essentially, if you treat them treat them nicely, they will treat you nicely. That's the long and short of it. And so you want to give them, that is the beneficial bacteria, because you can also feed, as most people do in the Western diet, standard American diet, SAD diet, you can feed the bad bacteria, and then you get a lot of bad results. So you want to feed the beneficial bacteria through diet. And I often say that you can't out supplement a bad diet. You can't out exercise a bad diet. Now, for infants, a diet is obviously very well controlled. It's only breast milk or formula in the first 6 months or so. So that's a little bit easier, but it's harder for us adults to stay on a good diet. So a good diet is the core soluble fibers. HMO is a soluble fiber. It's something that no human can actually digest the soluble fibers, and this again is another way why I say that this is a God created sort of a design, because they're there not for the infant gut, but specifically for any gut of a human, but specifically given for, and they're there for the bacteria in the gut, and it's their food. We can't digest it; the bacteria can digest it. So that's the benefit there. And soluble fibers also come through diet, polyphenols, other things, that anything that is a food for beneficial bacteria could be under the category of prebiotics. Then you've got probiotics, and that just simply means live beneficial bacteria, however you consume them, all sorts of fermented foods, probiotics, um, often in capsules, sometimes just powders that somebody consumes. And that all the soil then, of course, is the colon, where all that is being fermented, digested, which then will produce postbiotics. And these are just simply the metabolites of bacteria. What do the bacteria produce by consuming these soluble fibers, these prebiotics? A large variety of beneficial things that now benefit us. I mean, it can benefit the bacteria, but also greatly benefits the human host. Short chain fatty acids such as butyrate, which heals the colonocytes, anti-inflammatory molecules, lower pH, as we've seen, neurochemicals such as serotonin and GABA. So a wonderful variety of postbiotics, and the more beneficial bacteria you have, and the good varieties and the good diversity, the larger amount and type of postbiotics that your gut bacteria will produce for you. So you've got prebiotics plus postbiotics will lead to probiotics, rather, will lead to postbiotics. So in this case, the HMOs are the prebiotics, the B infantis are the probiotics, and the postbiotics are everything I listed there, which will result in a healthy microbiome. So let me walk you through this process a little more in detail, why I think this infant went from sickness to health. I've already said the process here increases good bacteria, which outcompetes the pathogens. And there's always a competition in the gut between various species, good bacteria fighting the bad bacteria, etc. But it was already seen in this case, the bifidobacteria lowers the colonic pH, which harms pathogens, does not allow them to thrive, which gives this now a wonderful competitive advantage to the bifidobacteria, allows it to then increase. Also, the B. infantis, this strain especially, consumes more HMO than B. fragilis. And I'll show you in part two, there's quite a competition going on between the Bifidobacteria infantis and the Bacteroides fragilis, because they both love HMO. They both can easily consume HMO. And again, there's quite a competition there. But the really positive thing, which gives another advantage, is that the B. infantis, this particular strain, and there's a couple other strains that do this as well, will consume all types of HMOs. There are 200 or more various subtypes of HMOs in breast milk. And I mean, some of them are infinitesimal amounts, but I'll show you next time the numbers of the top types. And B. infantis consumes all of those. So that gives it also a competitive advantage, even though, again, B. fragilis loves HMO. A certain type of HMO called fucosylated HMOs rinse the digestive tract, which then acts as antivirals and antimicrobials and prevents pathogens from adhering to the gut lining. So that's another thing that HMO in the breast milk, or if you add it to your formula, will do. Also, production of short chain fatty acids, which I already mentioned, will heal the intestinal permeability, leaky gut. And also HMO increases anti-inflammatory cytokines and decreases pro-inflammatory cytokines. So all of those things together, and I'm sure you can list some other things, but this all happens from a combination of HMOs plus B. infantis. Now, I'll talk about HMO for a little bit here. Um, in human milk, which is obviously breast milk, you've got HMOs as the third largest ingredient behind lactose and lipids. And you see there a range between 15 and 5. And that's because, as I've mentioned, the amounts of HMO will decrease over the months. And so you get these various ranges. And here's just a quick chart of some of the leading types and what it looks like after 90 days of lactation. So that is where the human milk oligosaccharides come from. And oh, by the way, oligosaccharide just means a short sugar chain, which is what soluble fibers are. They're oligosaccharides, many of them. So that wraps up part one. Let me just give you an idea of what I want to cover in part two. The layout, the secretor status and infant microbiome. And secretor status has to do with the amount and types of HMO that occur in breast milk, and the possible impact that had on this particular infant and could have on any infant. I want to give more details on the competition between B. fragilis and B. infantis, as I already implied. I want to show other benefits of this particular strain for this case study, because there's a lot more benefits that I saw other than what I've mentioned in this video. Other similar strains of B. infantis, I want to talk about that. So what's a takeaway here from this? I wonder if there ought to be routine testing of infant microbiomes. Now that raises a whole interesting question: is who's going to interpret all of these results, et cetera. But I've just seen in this case, if, for example, this infant was not tested, then the dysbiosis would have continued, and who knows what sort of other issues it could have had long term. So in his case, it was extremely important that this process, and everyone is very thankful that it has had a good outcome. But I'm not a health professional, so I'm not telling you what to do in any sense. Just trying to share a story and give a lot of research that backs up these things. So I hope that you have enjoyed this information. I hope that it's helpful for many, and hopefully we'll see you on part two. Thank you.